Here are all the secrets and facts in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet you should know. In Scarlet and Violet, there was a hidden file for a whole unused house in Zapapico town, which actually proves that Game Freak most likely wanted to include interiors of all the houses and buildings, but were simply not able to actually finish it. That isn't the only data mine information that was actually included in the game. There was even more. There's another room that looked something like a station with turnstiles and different colored banners on the walls that also existed that perhaps could have been some sort of travel hub, or maybe even a reception area to a battle facility, as it looks very similar to the one from Sword and Shield's train station. It's again really weird, and maybe there was a possible battle facility of sorts that was supposed to exist in Scarlet and Violet that in the end they ended up actually canceling, which is really weird because you do have all these models that are available in the game that can be found in the files but were never used. In the Indigo Disc DLC for Scarlet and Violet, you can actually find Ditto blocks all around the terrarium when you're doing the barbecue quest or BBQ quest. However, there is something really interesting. There's a 1 in 100 chance of you also finding a shiny Ditto block while exploring, which is kind of crazy but also unfortunate because you can't actually catch these. So if you do find one, yeah, it really sucks. Interestingly, also introduced in the Indigo Disc was a bunch of new outfits. Now, one of these outfits was actually the Essentia suit, which could be a hint to Pokemon Legends ZA that is actually found in Scarlet and Violet. Now, the Essentia suit is from Pokemon X and Y and was worn by one of the people from Team Flare, which is really strange because, yeah, why is this available in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet? Most likely a very strange little hint towards the Legends ZA game's existence. If you head over to the first gym location, you will specifically see a version of Vivillon here present. Now, this is the fancy pattern Vivillon, which is, funny enough, one that was distributed in Pokemon X and Y back in 2014 to celebrate the GTS hitting 100 million Pokemon trades. And now makes me wonder if this was also another little hint that connects Paldea and Kalos together with Legends ZA. Speaking of which, the first gym you actually do go up against features a Teddiursa that can terrestrialize into a bug type, probably referencing a bugbear, and also the fact that bears are kind of known in stories for loving to eat a bunch of honey. But it doesn't end there. We also have another gym battle against Brassius, whose ace Pokemon is a Sudowoodo, who isn't a grass type, but thanks to terrestrializing, it can finally turn into a Terra grass type, which again is a cool little reference, especially to something like Gen 2, where we see Sudowoodo for the first time. If you check your bedroom when you play Pokemon Scarlet and Violet for the first time, you can find a Switch with Joy-Cons that will actually match the Joy-Cons that you have in real life. They will actually be recognized, and there are even Joy-Cons for Animal Crossing and Splatoon as well, which is pretty cool of a little detail. If you've paid attention to Miss Rhyfort, she has accessories all over her, but all of them actually match different special or legendary Pokemon. You've got Marshadow as a hair accessory, Tapu Koko as a bracelet, Articuno as a necklace, and a Lunala belt buckle. So it seems like Miss Rhyfort is really obsessed with legendaries, which makes sense because she sends you on a legendary quest of your own. During the scene with Penny where we see her room, when you finish your journey, you can actually see that there is a Game Boy Classic on her shelf, as well as a Nintendo DS Lite, and also a GameCube. So it looks like Penny is a fan of old consoles, but also, does this confirm then that, I guess, the Game Boy and all these consoles exist in the world of Pokemon? I guess it does, but also, it's a cool little reference. Now, you guys know the Hall of Fame and how usually at the end of our games, we will be registered into the Hall of Fame by having our Pokemon heals in the machine. But basically, in Scarlet and Violet, the Hall of Fame is now recorded in a book inside of the school instead, which is a bit different, but nonetheless, we're now immortalized inside of the book. Did you guys know there is actually a secret event in the Area Zero Underground? So after beating the Indigo Disc, you can head down into the hidden part of Area Zero. And here, you can go at the bottom and battle a Stellar-typed Garchomp. Now, if you actually manage to defeat it, you'll hear a bit of a noise, and a secret path will have opened up, and if you go there, it will lead you towards the secret treasure cave. Inside, you'll find loads of items that are super useful, and again, I think it's a cool little detail that included something like this, a secret cave that gets unlocked only by defeating a Terra Garchomp. If you fly to the top of the terrarium, you can actually go to the highest peak of it and reach the giant ball. If you go there, you can find a Stellar Terra Shard, a gold cap, as well as ability patches. And at the top of the terrarium, the ball is kind of interesting because the only way to do this, to get there, is by unlocking flying after completing the Indigo Disc story and talking to Ameris that will give you the ability to do so. Speaking of that giant ball in the terrarium, what is interesting is that the actual color of the giant ball will actually change, and it will correlate based on how far you've made it in the story and if certain things have been done. And it could be connected to the time machine in Area Zero. As you can see here, if the time machine is active, the crystals inside of the Area Zero lab glow green, but if the time machine has been inactivated, they actually glow amber or orange, meaning it's inactive, and we also see this affecting the giant ball in the Indigo Disc terrarium as well. If we head inside of Nemona's house on Poco Path, we can see an interesting painting. It seems to be one of Battle Bond Greninja. Again, an interesting connection back to the Kalos region and potentially a hint of the return of this Pokemon. In Nemona's dorm room, there are boxes for Pokemon food that feature Tyranitar, Talonflame, and Meryl, as these three Pokemon are known to yield EVs, or effort value points, in attack, speed, and HP, which are the most commonly needed EVs to build a Pokemon for battle, meaning that Nemona is a really hardcore battler, and she even EV trains her Pokemon, which is insane. Did you guys know that Team Star from Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is actually placed around the map in a specific shape? They're supposed to resemble the real-life star constellation called Cassiopeia, which, interestingly enough, would explain the nickname of Penny being Cassiopeia as well. So it's a nice connection between how Team Star exists. It's literally called Star because all of them are supposed to be the stars that put together the star constellation of Cassiopeia. There's potentially a little bit of a reference to Rival Blue from Pokemon Red, Blue, Green, Yellow, Fire Red, Leaf, and Green, as well as Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, being referenced at the Pokemon centers with a silhouette of him in Scarlet and Violet. Did you guys know that Diamond Dust, a feature introduced in Generation 4 by Junichi Masuda, actually appears in this game as well and replaces snow and appears on your birthday and New Year's Eve on Glaciado Mountain, which is, again, a cool reference back to Gen 4. If it's your birthday in the game, you as a trainer will get a happy birthday wish on your birthday if you go to the Pokemon Centers, which is a feature that's been around for a long time as well. So these strange glyphs in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's Area Zero location were really strange to us when we first saw them, but it turns out that they're actually a map. Specifically, a map for the locations of the Ruinous Treasures legendary Pokemon from Scarlet and Violet. These guys are ones that you hunt for after talking to Miss Ryfort, and after doing that, you can go and hunt them all down and capture them. There were actually files inside of Scarlet and Violet that never ended up being used. These were two items. Specifically, they resembled some form of stones, one being a little bit more purple and one being a little bit more orange. Now, it was speculated these stones were going to be some sort of evolution stone to transform Paradox Pokemon, or perhaps stones that were going to be given to new forms of Miraidon and Koraidon. However, they simply went unused for the time being. If you read the Pokedex entry for Roaring Moon, it mentions that according to an article in a dubious magazine, this Pokemon has some connection to a phenomena that occurs in a certain region. Now, this could be a reference to Salamence and its Mega Evolution from Pokemon X and Y, which also would make sense because Kalos would physically in the real world be France, which is located right next to Spain and Portugal, which are what Paldea is based on. Start off your game, if you talk to a lady in town in Scarlet and Violet, she will offer to give you a phone case, but this is the fun part. They will actually be different based on what save files of other Pokemon games you have on your Nintendo Switch. So if you've completed Legends Arceus, you get an Arceus phone case, and if you completed the other ones, you can actually get other different phone cases. If you make it to Alfrenada City, you will actually see references to the Gen 1 Pokemon icons, yes, from Red and Blue. These are the icons used for the games back then in your party menu, which is really cool. You ever noticed in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet that if you look at the word Herba Mystica, it's actually really interesting. If you take the initials of both the words, you get HM, which of course, if you played any of the original Pokemon games, you will know that HMs were special moves or hidden machines, basically moves that were used to open up paths, break away sections like waterfall or surf that will allow you to move around the ocean. And well, in this game, they've replaced it with Herba Mystica, which allows Koraidon Miraidon to fly, scale stuff, and allow you to progress further in the game, just like HMs did back in the day. There's actually a backpacker that can be found in Los Platos that makes a reference to secret bases, which you guys may remember from, of course, Ruby and Sapphire, the old classics. There's also another cool thing. There could actually be a reference to Pokestar Studios on the t-shirt of one of the Pokemaniacs, which also is a perfect connection to the Pokestar, I guess, references that we see in the Indigo Disc later on. During language class, there are a lot of references that can be seen in the background to Alola, which is really interesting because the references are just so out there, but yeah, there's just some references to Alola with like Alolan Raichu and whatnot in the background. Now, this is actually something that's found in Pokemon Sword and Shield, but here there is a reference to, of course, Scarlet and Violet. What is that? Well, there's a wallpaper that seems to be depicting vines and oranges, or, you know, grapevines, which is really interesting because this was a early on sort of hint to Scarlet and Violet, because Scarlet and Violet both use purple and orange, right? Orange for oranges, and of course, purple for grapes, which is really cool. There's a book called Galar, A History, which was written by Sonia from, of course, the Galar region, which retells the incidents that took place in Stow-on-Side back in Sword and Shield, which is really awesome. It's like a cool little reference for, you know, Sword and Shield, and just for fans to be able to connect things. We see a reference to Hisui during history class, where we can see Laventon and the original Pokeball being shown off on the board. Did you guys know that Baggin, the character from Legends Arceus, who basically overcharged you huge amounts of money for your bag to be upgraded, is also referenced, as there is a family business in Paldea called Baggins that actually sells bags. So yeah, cool little reference. If you played the Indigo Disc, then you may know about the special Pecharunt event. It's for the Pokemon Pecharunt, but there's something really cool. Pecharunt can actually be seen floating behind the player in the intro to the epilogue event. It's such a small little detail, but it shows that Pecharunt was already in Kitakami at this point, just messing around. You guys know that Nosepass is pointing towards true north always in the games until you interact with it, so it's always going to point towards true north in the game. Each time you fly to a new map from the DLC, there's actually a special different loading icon in the bottom right that represents the location you're going to somewhat. Now, every Pokemon game has to have a creepy ghost girl, and in Scarlet and Violet, we seemingly didn't have one until you look at one of the paintings in the League Club room in the Blueberry Academy during the Indigo Disc. Now, when you change the room's theme to the ghostly theme, there is a painting of a girl where the eyes seem to be following you. It takes a bit to figure it out and see it, but when you do see it, you realize that Ghost Girls are still here. Meloetta's appearance. Now, if you guys do not know this, you can finally get Meloetta during normal gameplay, of course, in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, after 13 years since the last time you could actually get Meloetta way back in Black and White, which was released all the way in 2010. But Meloetta can actually appear, and to get it, it's not that complicated. Basically, make sure you completed all the Indigo Disc stuff, head over to this location, and once you're here, you simply gotta spin around for a little bit and change your actual music, and then spin around for a bit, look in a certain direction, change your camera filter, and guess what? Meloetta appears. It's a really cool little like Easter egg secret, but also awesome event. There actually seems to be another reference and really cool thing about the Indigo Disc, which is the reference to the nature preserve from Black and White 2 that can be found, which actually has a Haxorus with the stellar Terra type roaming the area, just like the shiny Haxorus does in Black and White in the nature preserve. And also, if you look at them both from above, they actually look identical. It's possible that Clay from Pokemon Black and White could be Lacey's father, as they both share design aspects. Now, both of their ace Pokemon are Excadrill. They both have big, thick eyebrows. The green gem on Clay's cowboy hat is identical to the gem in Lacey's hairpins, and both their names in Japanese are related to the type of root crop. So basically, they are having a lot of connections between each other, and there's no way they are not related. Now, Petrarant is a whole event, but if you play the Indigo Disc before you finish it, the text will say something different as opposed to if you complete the Indigo Disc. And it was probably made to be like a hint at the Petrarant event. So if you talk to the doll that starts the event, it will say a different piece of information. Now, after you completed the Indigo Disc story, you can actually have a really cool event that takes place at the Crystal Pool of Kitakami. Here you can go and you will meet the professor of your respective game. So if you're playing Scarlet, you're gonna run into Sada. If you're playing Pokemon Violet, you run into Turo, and they will basically complete this whole time travel paradox thing situation with you, which is really cool. But you get to meet the real professors at this point, and they're seemingly time traveling to you, which is really awesome. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but Crispin, the character you have to battle in Indigo Disc, his arena where you battle him is actually resembling a frying pan, which makes sense and fits his whole theme, which is all about him, well, being a sort of chef. Speaking of Crispin, we learned by talking to the people in the Elite Club room that Crispin actually lost his place in the school's Elite Four after we beat him and the champion Kieran. So yeah, basically because we beat Crispin and because we beat Kieran, basically Kieran got bumped down from champion to just Elite Four member, and then the lowest ranking member being Crispin simply got kicked out, which is kind of messed up. Outside of the Treasure Eatery in Medali, there's a poster which contains silhouettes of the Pokemon Okidogi, Munkidori, and Pheasantipiti, which can be seen. And this was clearly a total hint very early on for, of course, the expansions, the Indigo Disc, and of course, the Teal Mask. When you start your game in Scarlet and Violet in your house, you can actually find a substitution doll in the living room. Just a cool little detail. Right outside your house on the Poco Path, you can actually find a man who has been throughout all the different Pokemon games. The Power of Science guy. This man has been around pretty much every Pokemon game and always talks about the power of science. And there's actually a little bit of a cool thing about the names of the different paths you take and the different quests you do during your journey in Scarlet and Violet. The Victory Road quest is actually a direct reference to, of course, the Victory Roads that were these locations in every previous Pokemon game that will lead you to the Elite Four in all different journeys. Sada and Turo's names are based on future and past in the Spanish language, which is pasada and futuro, making sense given that the region of Paldea is based off of Spain and Portugal. Speaking of references, the plaza in Mesagosa is actually based on Madrid, but it also has a shape which features all the Pokemon types, which is a reference to the Terra-type gimmick that you have to use in Paldea, which can be seen in the middle of the square. Gimmighoul's design actually is really interesting as it resembles a dowsing machine, or as it used to be referenced in the previous games, item finder. Similar to the real-life device used to search for metals in the ground, and given that Gimmighoul is all about getting the coin, it makes total sense that its literal design is going to be that of something on the search for gold. In the Indigo Disc, if you head to the Savannah biome, there's actually a Pyroar that can be found on top of a hill, which actually is a clear reference to the Lion King with, Simba and whatnot, just standing on top of the hill, looking out across the vast savannah. If you play the Teal Mask DLC, you will actually find something very interesting. If you use the camera, you can actually change your music now to the Game Boy Gold and Silver battle music from Roots, which is really strange, but it could be a reference to the fact that Kitakami is based on Japan, and of course the first 4 regions of Pokemon, including Johto, are also based on Japan. Now, Perrin in the DLC seems to be actually related to none else than Adaman from Hisui and Pokemon Legends Arceus, which is cool because Kitakami in the real world is actually a location that is right next to Hokkaido, which is the real-life inspiration for Hisui and Sinnoh. If you try to buy Peachy's items at her shop in Kitakami, but you try to buy them with League points, she will not accept them and jokingly ask you if LP is some kind of cryptic currency, being a clear joke in reference to cryptocurrencies, which, were very popular at the development time of course, these DLCs. Now, the Timeless Woods in Kitakami, where you deal with the whole Blood Moon Ursaluna quest, is actually really interesting because, of course, we already know Blood Moon Ursaluna drifted ashore from Hisui in the past, which makes sense because if you think about it, Hisui is right next to where Kitakami would be on the real-world map, but it doesn't end there. Another interesting thing is that if you actually look at this forest, the Timeless Woods, it's oddly similar to Eterna Forest, and what's really funny is that the Timeless Woods actually have a different Japanese names, which is Eternity Forest, which, yeah, Eterna Forest, Eternity Woods, you can kind of see the connection. Billy and Onair are interesting characters in Kitakami. Now, these two will send you on a long side quest, which is a literal goose chase, but there's actually two fun Easter eggs about them. One is their names, which, when combined, literally spell out billionaires, so they are rich, and that's kind of obvious. However, number two is that they both wear gold and silver on them, which fits with the other Johto references in the game, and specifically in Kitakami, which we see. And let's not also forget about the fact that they also could be Nemona's parents, because when she's asked about her parents, well, she tells that they are basically the people who run a very, very famous and very, very expensive and rich company. Kieran's name is interesting, as it might make reference to the word black in multiple different languages, which could be referencing the darkness within him. Now, there's also another thing, which is when Kieran punches the Loyal 3 shrine after the third battle, a purple mist can be actually briefly seen coming out of it, implying that the trio's revival may have something to do with Kieran himself. However, Kieran also has the same purple in actually his hair during the teal mask as the color of the toxic chain that we see on none else than, of course, Pecharunt. Now, this further implies some sort of connection between them. And also, Kieran is the first NPC shown capturing a Pokemon with a Master Ball, and his instance of trying to capture, well, specifically Terapagos with a Master Ball, was also the first time ever in Pokemon that we've seen a Master Ball fail. The many Shiny Luck Pokemon of Scarlet and Violet, so they're all going to be on screen right now, and none of these Pokemon on screen are actually able to be officially caught as a Shiny in Scarlet and Violet, which kind of makes some weird little secrets, because if you don't really spend a lot of time on the internet, you're not really going to have seen these from all the leaks and stuff. But yes, there are shiny versions for all of these Pokemon, but they're just not available, and they probably won't be available until sometime really far into the future when we see a distribution event for these Pokemon at some point. Briar is a strange character, but interestingly, her outfit gives us some strange hints. See, her jacket actually has hints to both Scarlet and Violet, as the shapes on it are from the logos, but it doesn't end there. Her top is purple. Her bottom is scarlet-colored red, which is really intriguing, because it means that all around this character, all about her, has got to do with Scarlet and Violet. Now, Dipplin is kind of a cool Pokemon, because if you have a shiny Dipplin, which turns gold when you capture it, you will actually get an interesting situation. See, if you use the signature move Syrup Bomb when having a Dipplin, it will actually turn the syrup into a gold color, where normally it would be red colored. When it's shiny, it will literally turn into a gold color of shiny Dipplin. Also, the gold color is clearly a reference to the golden apple from mythology, which is often mentioned. Cyrano, the man who runs the Blueberry Academy, is quite strange. See, if you beat the entire League Room levels and battle Cyrano, he will actually reward you, as he will be the secret boss. And once you've actually taken him on and defeated him, he will give you a free shiny Blitzel, the first and only NPC that can trade you a guaranteed shiny Pokemon, which in my opinion is kind of cool. Speaking of the League Room, if you battle through the League Room, you can actually unlock a bunch of stuff, like different decorations for the League Room that will actually cause different trainers and gym leaders and more to show up. And thanks to this, you can change the room into many different things. One of these changes can actually be a black and white room, which makes a bunch of references to Unova. There's also a specific room that resembles everything from Pokestar Studios from black and white, which is really crazy. So yeah, every single version of these rooms has little hints and secrets in them, and we'll talk about a few of those in a little bit. The futuristic version of the club room has screens that reference the Pokestar Studios film location, with one screen featuring the Mecha Tyranitar from the Big Monster series, another one featuring the mysterious UFO from the Invader series, and also cardboard copies of the helmets worn in both of these movie series can also be found hanging on the walls. So yes, a lot of references to Pokestar Studios from Black and White. Of course, you guys know you can trade a bunch of Pokemon with the different characters that you invite to the League Club Room, but did you know that the Palmo that's traded to the player by director Clavel may be the same Palmo, or Palmy, from the opening of the actual game? It might be the exact same one. Speaking of being the same one, it's also possible that the combat-bred Tauros traded to the player by Nemona actually is, and I think it's actually confirmed, is the same one from the opening of the game. You guys may remember the one attacking the screen. It might be the exact same one. Now, there are multiple secrets hidden in these Scarlet Violet books. One of these was the stellar form of Terapagos that we saw the sketch of, which is kind of crazy to know ahead of time. There's also other sketches that hinted at different Paradox Pokemon before their official reveal, which looked far more different in design than their final versions, as well as a deep down part of Area Zero which we never explored. In the League Club room, you can join the Baseball Club and the Music Club, which will allow you to unlock either new throwing styles that change the animation when you throw your Pokeballs, or the Music Club, which will give you brand new smart speakers that can actually change your background music. You can even hear the Jubilee Village music from Legends Arceus, the Castelia City music, and many more tracks from throughout Pokemon. You can also join the Photography Club, which will allow you to unlock the upgrades for the Rotom phone camera. This will allow you to do improvements and as well as new filters for your photos. Then there's also the Terrarium Club. Now, if you fully unlock this, it will give you upgrades on the different biomes around the terrarium, allowing you to see a ton of starter Pokemon all around the Indigo Disc. Now, there is a device called the Synchro Machine, which most of you may already know about, but did you know that this device may have been referenced all the way back in Gen 1, where Bill turns himself into a Pokemon, and also in Pokemon X and Y, where characters often talk about synchronizing with a Pokemon or turning into a Pokemon. The Chargestone Cavern found in the terrarium in the Indigo Disc is actually based off of the Chargestone Cave. Yep, a tiny name difference there, cave and cavern, but yeah, one is from the Black and White and one is in the Indigo Disc, and in the inside, they all look the same with the same rocks charged up with electricity. There's a Team Star event after the Indigo Disc is completed. If you head back to Paldea, you can run into your old Team Star rivals, and they'll no longer be wearing their Team Star outfits, and instead, they will actually be in their school uniforms, and you can have a whole side story with all of them. And if you complete the side quest, you'll get an extra new uniform and the Team Star helmet, which looks just like the ones that the Grunts were using. And we'll also unlock Atticus at Porto Marinada, where you can now go to him and unlock even more actual items. Now, all these items from him are going to be super expensive, but a lot of these items are stuff like the Team Flare like visors, as well as the helmet from X and Y. There's a lot of X and Y references in the stuff you can buy from Atticus, actually. Now, the item printer was a new device which was actually brought into this game, similar to the device we saw of specifically the Cramomatic back in the Isle of Armor. But what's interesting is you can put a bunch of materials into this thing, but if you upgrade it, it will actually increasingly change its design from a regular Pokeball to a Great Ball, Ultra Ball, and then of course a Master Ball. Now, we spoke a bit about Perrin already, but Perrin actually has two special little secret events that you can do with her. Of course, you guys know the Blood Moon Ursaluna thing, but she actually trades you a free Growlithe, and if you've finished Kitakami and you still have that Growlithe and you've been using it, if you show it to Perrin when she shows up in the Indigo Disc, she will actually reward you with a Sports Ball. Now, the Sports Ball is a specific item that was used during Pokemon, the Johto games, right? So Gold, Silver, Heart Gold, Soul Silver. But what's interesting is that in Heart Gold, Soul Silver, the Sports Ball is only used during the bug catching contest. You guys may remember this. It was a really fun event, but it's really cool that Perrin does this for you. Now, after completing the Pokedex and showing it to Perrin in the Indigo Disc, she will tell you about the location of two very special Paradox Legendary Pokemon, which will differ depending on which version of the games you have. So once you go there, you'll find one of two, or actually you'll find both of them, but basically you'll find Paradox Pokemon based off of either the legendary beasts or the legendary horses. In Artisan City, you can find some weird art objects which are from the secret bases and an item known as the Meditative Seat. Now, this is really weird, and you guys may remember the secret bases, so I wonder if this is a hint that secret bases might come back in the future. I mean, at least I hope so. Now, you guys may remember Jack. He's one of our teachers in Paldea, but in Kitakami, if you actually run into him, he actually has something very interesting about him. If you complete the Pokedex, he will actually give you the diploma and whatnot. Like, he'll be the one to give you the diploma of completion, but that's not all. He'll also reward you with one of the starter Pokemon from none else than Sinnoh. So yeah, he gives you one of the Sinnoh starter Pokemon as a free little starter, which is pretty cool and a nice little bonus. Now, if you guys did the little mini game called Ogre Oustin, every time you go to a harder level, if you do complete the hardest difficulty, you will be given a very interesting Pokemon. You'll be rewarded with a free, yes, a free shiny Munchlax, which is really cool in my opinion and an extra nice little bonus. Now, if you guys actually played Kitakami, one interesting thing is that you can donate a bunch of money to rebuild the shrine in Kitakami, the shrine of the three, like, Pokemon, like the legendaries, right? the 3 legendary heroes. I don't even want to call them that. They're literally evil. But if you actually give this old man a bunch of money, over $1 million Poké-Dollars, he will rebuild it, which is kind of a scam. I mean, he doesn't need $1 million Poké-Dollars. He's a little bit of a ripoff. But what is interesting is he'll give you a special outfit. Yes, the special outfit he gives to you is a cool-looking kind of kimono design, which is golden, which is pretty epic. Did you guys know that the title screen, yes, the opening screen when you start up Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, actually changes depending on the game and also if you've done the DLC? So basically, if you've played Scarlet and Violet, the initial screen should look something like this, but then there's also screens for when you've done the Indigo Disc, also before you've done the Indigo Disc and after you've done it. You'll sometimes see the book on the table, sometimes there'll be Pokeball on it. Generally speaking, the screen will change depending on what you have or haven't done, which is pretty epic in my opinion. There are actually 2 really cool things in the wild that we can see in the Indigo Disc. One of them is the fact that if we look for any of the wallabies, interestingly, their mothers will be hovering right above us at all times. And that's not all. If we go and find a Trapinch, you'll notice they're inside of these little pits and holes. Well, it turns out that this is something they actually do to catch prey. So I like these little details.